The day the signal came in was like any other, until it wasn't. Dr. Lucas Graham sat hunched over his workstation, staring at the blinking terminal in disbelief. At first, he thought it was a glitch, a freak anomaly, a system error, but then he saw the pattern. Rhythmic, deliberate, repeating. No random signal could do that. His heart skipped as he began to decode it. It wasn't just noise. It was a message. A series of mathematical sequences, like a cosmic fingerprint, too perfect to be natural. Within hours, the message was confirmed. A deep space observatory in Chile had picked up the same signal. By the time the word spread to NASA and other major agencies, the first global alert was issued. Humanity has detected an alien transmission. Lucas knew better than to believe it was an alien race reaching out. The signal was far too old. It had traveled across light years, taking centuries to reach Earth, but it was far older still. The data seemed to show patterns originating from a star system that hadn't been cataloged in over a century. An obscure system at the edge of known space, Sigma 6. It didn't make sense. Human technology had barely reached the outer edges of our own solar system. No probe had ever ventured so far out into the galaxy. So why had this signal been sent to Earth, and why now? Lucas's fingers flew across the console, rechecking the math, the coordinates. When the numbers came up again, a chill ran down his spine. The coordinates pointed not just to Sigma 6, but to a star system that had been previously marked uninhabitable, with no known life. But this was no ordinary signal. This wasn't just a plea for contact. It was a map that, if followed, might unlock a hidden chapter of human history. Lucas quickly typed out an encrypted message to NASA's command. "We need to go there. We need to know why they sent this to us." The universe was about to reveal its oldest secret, and Earth was ready to find out why. The Endeavour slipped into the void, its sleek hull cutting through the darkness toward the coordinates Lucas had unearthed. The vessel, a marvel of human engineering, was Earth's most advanced ship, capable of reaching distant stars in a fraction of the time it would take older spacecraft. Its crew, a carefully selected mix of scientists, military personnel, and specialists, was already tense with anticipation. For weeks, they'd been briefed on the signal's origins, but nothing had prepared them for the truth that lay ahead. Captain Hunter McLeod stood at the helm, his gaze fixed on the vast expanse of stars outside the observation window. A seasoned officer with years of deep space missions under his belt, McLeod was skeptical of the whole thing. Aliens? Maybe. But something about the signal felt wrong. Too precise. Too deliberate. And the idea that humans had been the ones to send it. He wasn't sure what to make of that yet. Approaching Sigma 6 system came the voice of Lieutenant Jessica Riley, the ship's navigator, as she adjusted the flight controls. ETA in 4 hours. The crew gathered in the observation deck, their faces lit by the distant glow of the stars. Lucas couldn't contain his excitement. The signal had led them here, and every instinct told him this was no coincidence. They were about to uncover something monumental. But as the Endeavour neared the system, things began to take a turn. The star at the center of Sigma 6, designated Eryx, was dim, a dying red giant, too faint to support life. But something was wrong. A massive energy signature pulsed from one of its outer planets, something that shouldn't exist. A structure, or perhaps a device, buried beneath layers of rocky debris. "It's there," Maya Ortega said, her voice low, almost reverent. "Whatever this is, it's ancient." Suddenly, the ship's systems flickered, and an alarm blared across the ship. The sensors had gone haywire. Something was interfering with their instruments. Something massive. The crew exchanged uncertain looks, knowing that whatever they were about to find, it wasn't going to be easy. The secrets of the galaxy were waiting for them, but they would not be given freely. The Endeavour dropped out of hyperspace with a sudden shudder, its engines groaning under the strain. Ahead, the planet loomed. Dark, desolate, its surface a patchwork of jagged mountains and deep craters, the kind of lifeless world that most people would avoid. Yet something about it pulled them in. The signal had led them here, and now, as they approached, the true nature of their mission was beginning to sink in. Captain McLeod stood at the bridge, his arms folded tightly across his chest. He tried to hide his nerves, but his mind kept circling back to one question. What were they really looking for? The data they'd uncovered so far made no sense. This wasn't just an alien civilization they were tracking. It was something much older, something that defied the conventional understanding of history. Entering orbit, Riley called out, breaking McLeod's reverie. "It's bigger than I thought. We've got a massive structure down there, bigger than any city we've seen. It's almost as if it was built to last for eternity." Lucas stood next to him, eyes glued to the scanner. "This can't be real," he muttered. The scale of what they were seeing was beyond anything human technology had conceived of. The structure appeared to stretch for miles beneath the surface, a massive underground complex that extended deep into the planet's crust. There was no way this was a natural formation. "Let's land and take a closer look," McLeod said, turning to the crew. He didn't need to ask. Every single one of them was already prepared. The need to know what lay beneath that planet's surface was too great, too compelling. The descent was slow, cautious. As the ship broke through the planet's thin atmosphere and touched down, the crew could feel the weight of something ancient in the air. There was no life here, no sound, just an eerie silence. The first step onto the alien ground felt heavier than any of them had anticipated. Maya Ortega led the way, her boots crunching against the dry soil. The others followed, weapons ready, but they knew this wasn't going to be a simple reconnaissance mission. Whatever had left this structure behind, it wasn't done with humanity yet. Inside, the answers waited, hidden in the ruins. But so did the dangers. The air inside the ancient structure was cool and stale, as if it had been untouched for millennia. The crew of the Endeavour moved cautiously, their boots echoing softly in the vast, dimly lit hallways. The walls were covered in alien symbols, intricate carvings that flickered as the ship's lights scanned them. Every surface seemed to hum with a low, almost imperceptible energy, like the building itself was alive, or waiting for something. "This place, it's human," Maya Ortega said, her voice reverberating in the quiet. She ran her fingers along the walls, brushing away centuries of dust. "Not just human, though. This is us. Our ancestors. The architecture, the symbols. It's like a blueprint of Earth's first cities." Lucas knelt next to a holographic terminal embedded in the floor. The display flickered to life as he touched it, revealing images of star maps and cities, each marked with ancient symbols. As the hologram expanded, the true scale of humanity's past empire unfolded before them. Worlds spanning across galaxies, each one connected by trade, knowledge, and shared history. The artifacts they'd found were pieces of a much larger puzzle. But before they could dig deeper, a loud, sharp sound reverberated through the chamber. A sudden hiss, like air rushing through a broken pipe. "We're not alone," Captain McLeod growled, instinctively reaching for his weapon. At that moment, the lights flickered and then went out completely. The temperature dropped, and the silence was broken by the sound of something heavy moving in the dark. Footsteps, but not human. "Show yourself," shouted Sergeant Kelly Ward, the ship's security officer. Her hand hovered over the trigger of her weapon, ready to fire. Then, from the darkness, they emerged. Twisted, humanoid figures, their bodies gaunt and skeletal, with piercing, glowing eyes. They were covered in what looked like rusted armor, but it was unmistakably human, an ancient form of it. These creatures weren't just inhabitants of this world. They were remnants of humanity's own past, mutated and forgotten. Shadows of a race that once ruled the stars. "Jatak," Lucas whispered, his heart pounding in his chest. They were the soldiers, bred by us. The war had never truly ended. The Jatak closed in, their glowing eyes flickering with malice as they advanced toward the crew. They moved with unnatural speed, their bodies swaying like predatory creatures in the dark. The air felt thick with tension, and the hum of the building's ancient energy seemed to grow louder, almost like it was reacting to their presence. Captain McLeod's hand was steady on his sidearm, but even he could feel the gravity of the situation. These weren't just strange, hostile aliens. They were something much more familiar, something born from humanity's own hubris. The soldiers, or rather, the twisted remnants of those soldiers, had been created by the very humans they now faced. It was a nightmare, a living, breathing example of the darkest chapters of their ancestors' legacy. Back to the ship, McLeod barked, raising his weapon. Move. The crew began to retreat, but the Zhetok moved faster than expected. Their skeletal forms seemed to stretch and contort unnaturally, their movements almost mechanical as they attacked. Sergeant Ward fired first, the sound of her weapon cutting through the air, but the Zhetok barely flinched. Instead, they advanced with the cold determination of an army long trained for combat. "We need to get to the vault," Lucas called as he sprinted alongside the others. "There's something in there, something that could help us." As they fought their way through the ruins, the team came to a massive, rusted door hidden deep in the heart of the structure. The door was covered in ancient symbols, similar to those they had seen earlier, but this time the markings weren't just decorative. They were warnings. Warnings from a civilization that had known the horrors of its own creation. Lucas worked quickly, hacking into the door's ancient interface. Sweat dripped down his face as the Zhetok pressed in from all sides. The door groaned and clicked, finally giving way with a heavy thud. Beyond it, they found what they had been searching for, a massive chamber filled with stasis pods, each one holding a human figure. The ancients, the first generation of humanity, genetically enhanced, mentally superior, and now potentially their only hope. As the pods began to open, the team realized one terrible truth. Humanity's past wasn't just buried in history. It had been sleeping, waiting to rise again. The stasis pods hissed as they slowly opened, revealing the first generation of humanity, immaculate and untouched by time. Each pod contained a figure suspended in a liquid, their bodies pale and serene, their features perfect and sharp. Lucas's heart pounded as he stepped closer to one of the pods, peering inside. The figure within was human, but not like any human he had ever seen. Their muscles were finely sculpted, their eyes closed in an eternal sleep. These were no ordinary humans. They were the elders, genetically engineered to be superior, to lead, to guide the galaxy. "These are the ancestors," Maya Ortega whispered, her voice filled with awe. They were the rulers, the architects of the galaxy. But as the pods continued to open, the feeling of reverence shifted to something darker. The ancients didn't stir at first. They remained frozen in time, as if unaware of the chaos unfolding outside. But when their eyes finally flickered open, it was like a switch had been flipped. Their gaze was sharp, calculating. They looked around the chamber with cold precision, scanning the crew, taking in their surroundings. The silence stretched, thick with tension, before one of them, a man with striking silver hair and piercing blue eyes, stepped forward. His voice, though steady, carried the weight of centuries. "Who are you?" he asked, his words like a command. His tone held no warmth, only authority. "Why have you awakened us?" Lucas stepped forward, heart racing. We didn't know if you were alive. We found the archives, your legacy. The galaxy has changed, and humanity. We need help. The ancient's eyes narrowed. "Humanity, you are not the last of us. You are a pale shadow." Captain McLeod exchanged a quick glance with the crew. They were out of their depth. These ancients were no mere relics of a forgotten age. They were still powerful, still dangerous. And now, they were waking up to a galaxy they no longer recognized. Outside, the Zhetok were closing in. The storm was rising. The chamber was thick with tension. The ancients stood like statues, their presence almost overwhelming, as if the weight of their ancient lineage filled every corner of the room. Their eyes, cold, calculating, locked onto the crew. Captain McLeod's hand never left his weapon, but he could feel the futility of it. These weren't just humans. They were something else, something far more dangerous. We were the architects of the galaxy. The ancient with silver hair continued, his voice carrying a cold authority that made the hairs on the back of Lucas's neck stand up. The Jetak are our failure, our mistake. We discarded them long ago, but it seems they have not forgotten. Maya Ortega stepped forward cautiously, her expression a mixture of awe and fear. You created them. You made the Jetak. Yes, the ancient replied without hesitation. The Jetak were bred as weapons, but they were meant to serve, to protect the Elder Empire. When the war came, we made them too effective. They turned against us, wiping out our worlds. We were forced into isolation, left to decay while they ravaged the galaxy. Lucas's mind raced as he tried to process the implications. The Jetak were born of humanity's own hubris, a race of soldiers engineered to be perfect, turned into monstrous enemies by the very civilization that had created them. The galaxy had been shaped by the Elder Empire, but it had also been destroyed by their arrogance. The cycle was repeating itself. The ancients didn't seem concerned with the past. They were focused on the present, on the future. The galaxy is ours once more, the ancient said, his voice hardening. We will reclaim what was lost. We will burn away the filth of the Jetak and rebuild the empire. You will help us. Lucas's stomach twisted. They weren't just seeking survival. They were seeking dominion. Outside, the storm was no longer metaphorical. The Jetak were arriving. Captain McLeod clenched his jaw. We're not helping you take over the galaxy. The ancient's eyes gleamed with dangerous intent. Then you will perish with the rest of them. The final battle had already begun. The rumble of Jetak warships echoing through the planet's atmosphere grew louder, vibrating the walls of the ancient chamber. The sky outside was darkening as the enemy fleet descended, its ships blotting out the stars. They were here, relentless, merciless, and angry. Captain McLeod's mind raced. The ancients had made it clear they were not interested in negotiating. They wanted control, and they would wipe out anyone who stood in their way. The Endeavor's crew, along with the newly awakened ancients, now found themselves in a brutal and uncertain alliance. The Jetak were bearing down on them, and the only way out would be through sheer force. The ancients had technology beyond anything humanity had ever seen. Massive weapons capable of eradicating entire fleets. But there was a catch. In order to activate them, they would need to harness the energy of a nearby star, a feat that required a monumental sacrifice. Lucas, his mind still reeling from the revelations of the last few days, stood next to Maya, staring up at the holographic maps the ancients had projected. We can't let them use that weapon. It'll destroy everything. Maya nodded grimly. They're willing to burn the galaxy down if it means they get their empire back. We can't let them. But the clock was ticking. The Jetak were already deploying their forces across the planet. The battle was inevitable, and the ancients showed no sign of hesitation. They began to assemble their war machines, their eyes empty of empathy. They had been born to conquer, to lead, and now, after centuries in stasis, they were ready to reignite the flames of their lost empire. As the first wave of Jetak ships began to bombard the surface, Captain McLeod made a decision. We fight them. We fight for Earth. For our future. The final assault was swift and brutal. Humanity and the ancients clashed against the Jetak forces with everything they had. Ancient weapons, modern technology, and sheer will. As the battle raged on, the Jetak began to retreat, their forces decimated by the might of the reawakened Elder technology. But even in victory, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that the war was not truly over. The galaxy was scared. Humanity's past had risen, and now it was up to them to decide what kind of future they would create. The Endeavor's crew stood at the precipice of a new era, one where the true legacy of humanity, its brilliance, its hubris, its potential, would shake the stars. And as the last Zhatok ship burned in the atmosphere, one truth remained clear. Humanity was no longer a forgotten species. They were the galaxy's new rulers. The new dawn had come.